Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. If you're checking out the set around me right now, this is so much fun. I can do so many different things. We are beginning the Crab Cake Tour at Fadley's. We'll be joined by John Sarbanes here this week. I'm headed over to Costas over the weekend to celebrate their 50th anniversary. Johnny O was over there recently. We're going to take him out to some other Baltimore County establishments. And we're going to be at State Fair next week celebrating Don Moeller's favorite thing, and not just crab cakes or the chicken and waffles or the Chesapeake or the meat lover's omelet, but all things Catonsville, Don Moeller. What do you think of that?
Anytime you're celebrating the Ville, it is a good day.
Are the chairs out yet or no?
Chairs will be out. Hey, the chairs will be epic this year because we did not have chairs in the parade last year. So it will be, who knows what will happen this year. It'll be of epic proportions.
Our friends at Wise Markets, we've turned these from intelligent conversations into wise conversations, and nothing more wiser than getting out on the political trail, getting a little taste of what's happening out there. Don, you and I have had all sorts of pundits on. We follow all this stuff, but the sports thing's gotten away from me, right? I mean, Preakness, doping, Baffert, Orioles, no-hitters, Ravens, schedules, Vegas, all that. Let's get focused back out of the toy department, get back down to things. You've set the agenda here this weekend. Let's welcome our next guest in.
Well, terrific guest today, one that's well known to anybody that hasn't been under a rock for the past few years as the chair of the Democratic National Committee, former Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, former Maryland Secretary of Labor, former Secretary of Labor under President Barack Obama. Quite a resume. We welcome my friend Tom Perez to Baltimore Positive. Tom, thanks for joining us.
Well, it's great to be with you, Don. Great to be with you, Nestor, and great to be with all of your listeners. And also worked for a better part of a decade in Baltimore City at Maryland Law School, running the legal clinics, organizing in the city. And that was a proud chapter of my life.
So you've had a Fadley's crab cake is what you're telling me.
Oh, I used to walk to Lexington Market, because Maryland Law School is, right downtown there. And it's about a 10-minute walk up to Lexington Market. So I love your backdrop,
right? Literally.
Love your backdrop.
Well, hey, listen, so we usually do it in a place like this. Is the bad news. Like all of our guests, it's cool, it's Zoom, it's in, it's out, but no one gets a crab cake because, we're distanced at this point. But we began this journey over 2 years ago. We're celebrating with this crab cake tour. I guess more than anything, it's been a crazy year. If you had come and sat with us 18 months ago at Fadley's and had a crab cake with us for what the pandemic has done and what life has been like, this is an interesting time that the world's opening back up. We're this close. We're doing our first live event next week at State Fair over in Catonsville, al fresco. We both got our shots, but I think more than anything, there's a whole new world about to happen here, Tom.
Well, let's ask the chairman if your friend President Barack Obama and Michelle were to swing by and they were in a crab cake mood, where would you be taking them, Tom, to get a crab cake down in your neck of the woods?
Well, if we were in my neck of the woods, I'd be taking them to Franklin's, which is on Route 1 in Prince George's County, 15 minutes from my house. Back in 2006, I ran for state attorney general, and we had our headquarters. My number one directive to the team when we were getting headquarters is it had to be walkable to Franklin's, because Mike Franklin is the owner. He's a good friend. I'm a fan of microbrews. Back in 2006, that was a fledgling phenomenon. Now we have craft brews, all over the place.
Thank goodness for that, man. What a country. We got more beer. I love it.
On the 8th day, the Lord created good beer. I grew up in Buffalo. That's what we used to say.
That's a baseball next to you, isn't it?
It is a baseball, absolutely.
You're talking my language. We already heard the beer, crabs, and now we got baseball too. What's the baseball you have?
You see, I got to explain to you. My family's from the Dominican Republic, and there are two sports in the Dominican Republic. There's baseball and politics. Politics is what, Nestor, brought my family to the United States because we got kicked out by a brutal dictator named Trujillo. Baseball is my passion, and the ball behind me is an autographed ball from one of the best Dominican baseball players of all time, Pedro Martinez. And when I was labor secretary, there was an event, and I took my then probably 11 or 12-year-old son with me who was a pitcher. And we sat with Pedro in the audience, and he took this ball right here, and he was teaching him, how to throw a 2-seam, a 4-seam. And, Pedro became my son's hero for life. And, Juan Marichal was my hero growing up because he's the father of Dominican baseball. And so I love baseball, and it's always been, I've coached it. I played it. My problem, Nestor, in playing it is I was also a pitcher, but my fastball had deceptive speed. It was slower than you think. And so it didn't really help me over time. So I needed a new line of work. So I chose the other line of work from Dominicans, which is politics.
Well, I can't let you invoke Pedro with your baseball roots, and we're going to get to the DNC and we'll get to gubernatorial politics. But have you been taken back finally to your memories of Pedro by watching what Jacob deGrom has been doing with the Mets recently? It's the closest thing to Pedro we've seen, right, Tom?
Yeah, no, I mean, I watched deGrom play against the Red Sox actually a couple of weeks ago on ESPN. And he lost 1-0 because his team isn't doing jack at the plate at the time. They're getting a little better, but he's nasty. And the thing about Pedro, which was remarkable, and I saw him every time he was pitching at Camden Yards. I was there. He could throw a 98-mile-an-hour heater, and then the next pitch is 72 miles an hour. And when you've got that level, when you can change speeds 26 miles an hour, it's unbelievable. I used to play in a softball league, the beer leagues we called it, and it was actually in Howard County, and it was Monday night, and it was a fall league, and we'd go afterward and get together with the guys at the bar that sponsored us and have dinner there and stuff. And that was when Pedro, they were playing, this is a long time ago. They were in the playoffs. I think it was 1999, and they were playing Cleveland. Pedro had been hurt that year. But he was gutting it out. He came in I think the 4th inning of that game, and he pitched 6 no-hit innings of relief. And he really didn't have his hard stuff. He was, people don't understand about him. He was a pitcher. He wasn't just, some people are just throwers. Jacob deGrom is an artist. Pedro Martinez was an artist, and they were a sight to behold. And the O's had that for many years with Jim Palmer and the others. And as a Dominican, and Nestor, you've got some baseball passion in you as well.
Just a little.
It's there's nothing like it.
Tom, you get me talking about like Pedro Martinez in baseball. Don and I did an hour on the no-hitter last week, but I hadn't even thought so much like about Pedro, because you said Pedro, and I'm thinking, well, what history do I have with? I mean, I have so much history with Pedro. A couple of the best games I ever saw were in person. I was at the Pedro Zito Game 5 in Oakland, the crotch chop game. I was at that game, 5 rows off third base. I happened to be out on the West Coast. I was at the All-Star game in '99. Didn't count, but hair on the back of the neck, down on the field. Ted Williams, Tony Gwynn, all of that. So Pedro, I think into this era, there's nobody like him now, and I think that the slightness of him, the fact that steroids sort of stenched up everybody else, but not really him. There are few guys from that era it never rubbed on, for better or worse. Cal Ripken's one of those guys. Yeah. But I think, I've spent 30 years talking about baseball here. We can go all day on baseball.
I'm fine by that. My Gmail account, it has the number 21 in it. And people say, why do you have 21 in your number, in your Gmail?
I have a Clemente hat probably sitting.
Thank you. I knew you'd know the answer to that. I mean, I quite literally remember where I was when I heard that he died. I was a kid. I was probably 10 years old. I cried and cried and cried. I wanted to write a book about him, but I was only 10 years old. I didn't know how to write a book. I think he was, not only a remarkably gifted player. And by the way, people might not know this. he was a Rule 5.
I did not know that.
Yeah, they got him in the Rule 5 draft. The Pirates.
We are going to
by
shift.
the way, man, I want to share this with you. This is my I'm doing this crab cake tour. I got a picture of me wearing a Clemente hat in Pittsburgh with Bucko and Mike Tomlin and my wife in the swab. So I actually have a Clemente shirt. So I've been to the museum, the whole deal. So
yeah, I got my Andrew McCutcheon ball from the other room. I took my son up to Pittsburgh for a game a while back, and it's just, Clemente gives that city the Latin backdrop. August Wilson, who's one of my favorite playwrights, is a Pittsburgh native, and you should go to the August Wilson Theater in Pittsburgh if you ever get a chance. It is a really, and the Negro Leagues. The DC Grays shared a team with Pittsburgh for a while. And by the way, another place to go, speaking of baseball, Nestor, I'm sorry, I told you I could do this all day.
Keep going.
One remarkable privilege of my time in Team Obama is you travel all around the country. And next time you are in Kansas City, you've got to go to the Negro Leagues Museum in Kansas City.
Been there many times. I did 30 ballparks in 30 days for the Bone Marrow Registry back in 2015. We spent a whole day there. It was about an hour and a half of me touring it up on YouTube. So yeah, the Geddy Lee autograph collection from Rush of all of the Negro League baseball signed. Yeah. Best part of the museum for sure.
The only problem was I was looking at they had a statue of Buck Leonard, and like the statue of Babe Ruth, he had the wrong-handed glove on it. It's like, come on, guys.
Fix it. Got to fix it.
Yeah, get it right. Tom, if you have not had the opportunity, you're going to be traveling around the state a lot. Make sure you check out the Maryland Negro Hubert V. Simmons Baseball Museum in the Owings Mills Library CCBC. The Maryland Museum of Negro League Baseball is at the Owings Mills Metro Center. It's worthy of a Hall of Fame exhibit. That's how good it is. And someone like you that loves baseball, you will love. You mentioned August Wilson. We said we never go in a straight line. I've been fortunate. We'll talk a lot about Baltimore today, but Everyman Theater has done a number of the August Wilson plays, and that series of plays based in Pittsburgh, it's as brilliant as a playwright can be, right? In terms of transporting you to another time and place.
Absolutely. And, I've been to the Everyman Theater. It's actually not that far from where I used to work in Baltimore.
Right up the street.
I may have seen fences there. I'm trying to remember if I saw it there or Arena Stage in DC. But again, just a remarkable playwright, and I really do. And next time folks are in Pittsburgh, go look at his footprint, and then go to the Roberto Clemente statue.
Or as we say, the next time we go beat the Steelers in Pittsburgh, which the schedule just came out. So there.
Oh, that's right.
Well,
that's right.
For everybody, we are catching up on baseball. August Wilson, all things Pittsburgh, all things Baltimore, with former chair of the Democratic National Committee, Tom Perez. Tom, you've had such an interesting career and so much to talk about. But recently, you and I were involved in another conversation, and you touched on something that fascinated me because it's always been an interest of mine. And that is, I won't say it as well as you did. I'm going to ask you to say it better. But basically, the way I would capture it is you say, if you want to know what kind of a leader someone will be, look for their true north. Look for who they've been. Look for what they've believed in over a period of time. And I think that is such a core principle of leadership. And you've been a civil rights attorney. You've been a law professor. You've been a secretary of labor on a local and national level. You've been a city councilman and a county councilman and a county council president. What has been Tom Perez's true north through that whole time? And some of our audience might be hearing you for the first time. So we're going to sit back and let you talk a little about who Tom Perez is.
Well, I mentioned earlier in our conversation that my family came here from the Dominican Republic because they got kicked out. And my father served as part of uh, America's greatest generation. He served with pride in the U.S. Army. When he got out, they moved to Buffalo because of the similarities in the weather between Buffalo and the Dominican Republic. Not. But my parents taught me, Don, that if you want to get to heaven, you better have letters of reference from folks living in the shadows. I learned that at an early age. The ladder is always down. And now the ladder was always down for us because when I was 12, my dad passed away. And that same year, my mom got real sick. And I remember going to bed August of 1974, wondering if either of my parents were going to be alive. And moments like that give you a lot of strength. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I just wanted to change the world. That's what my parents taught me we should aspire to do. And my four siblings and I have all been involved in activities toward that end. And, we've talked a lot about baseball today, and no disrespect to Lou Gehrig, but I kind of feel like the luckiest person on the face of the earth because I've really had remarkable opportunities to work for the likes of Ted Kennedy in the US Senate and Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. And I had great bosses. And what I learned about leadership was, it's what you said, the best indicator of what someone's going to do in the future is what they've done in the past. I spent 15 years prosecuting police misconduct cases. And I did it because I have profound respect for law enforcement. And accountability has to be a part of that. I saw it in the Dominican Republic. There was no accountability and bad things happened. So I did that. And when I see the aftermath of Freddie Gray, I see the more things change, the more they stay the same. And I'm proud of the work I did in that setting. The most important tool an officer has in her toolbox or his toolbox is the trust of the people. And I did that all over the country. I took on predatory lenders, including predatory lenders here in the state of Maryland. I settled the two largest fair lending cases in the history of the Fair Housing Act. There were thousands of Baltimore residents, black and brown, who got screwed during the foreclosure crisis, the subprime crisis of 2006, 2007, the corrosive power of fine print. They got a deal that looked too good to be true because it was. And they were targeted because of the color of their skin. I had the great privilege of serving in Montgomery County on the county council. And you know this from your service in local government, Don. The rubber hits the road there. You can't print money. You got to solve problems. And we were able to do that. And the number one issue for us in local government is making sure our schools work. And you know that as a principal. And that's the work that I was proud to do on the county council. And we also were able to do a lot of things for our most vulnerable residents, whether it's making sure they had access to healthcare. And I really enjoyed my chapter with Martin O'Malley. We did a lot. And we had the Great Recession then, and we made sure that people got their unemployment checks as soon as possible. And I'll tell you what frosts me right now is when I hear stories of people waiting 6 months to get their unemployment check. That's unconscionable. What I've been really proud of in my tenure in every job I've had is I've helped make the place function and do its job effectively. When I got to the Labor Department, the US Labor Department, we were second from the bottom in worker satisfaction. And, I was thinking to myself and saying to my staff, like, the Labor Department, nobody wants to work there. That's not a good thing. And when I left, we were in like the top third of the large agencies. We moved up. And you know what? The formula was pretty simple. It's about listening to people. It's about getting their ideas. The vast majority of the innovations we implemented were someone else's idea. And we were able to help people at scale as a result. 2 million home health workers, mostly women of color on food stamps, got a raise because of a regulation we put in place to make sure they were entitled to minimum wage and overtime. Those are the things that make a difference. And I really think it's important for us now, as we think about the upcoming governor's race, to have leaders where you are going to know where they stand for. You're going to know what they're going to fight for. And we have this incredible, I think, once in a generation kind of moment right now, Don. And it's a moment to address so many issues of great importance, whether it's racial justice in Baltimore and elsewhere, addressing the police issues. And I applaud the Democrats in the legislature who did what they did this last session. We have an immense opportunity to implement the recommendations of the blueprint for education. And that's been your life's work, Don. And zip code should never determine destiny. And we now have the opportunity to do something. We have the opportunity to make sure that we address our economic and environmental commitments to address climate change. And this is an area where we've frankly underperformed over the last 8 years. Maryland should be the leading state in the country, to give you an example, on offshore wind. And 10 years ago, the governor talking the most about offshore wind was a guy named Martin O'Malley. But over the last 8 years, we've punched below our weight. And what's happened is all of the states to our north and now Virginia to our south are lapping us.
Tom, I'm gonna interrupt just for a second, because that drives me insane. Because I'm so glad to hear you reference that, because it seems to me, and you don't have to be a historian, as you said, you only have to go back a decade. It seems that under Governor O'Malley, we were poised to really grab that bull by the horn and be a national, if not international, leader. Nestor and I have had the governor on a number of times talking about his book, Smart Government, how he was tracking the success, how he was using data points to govern, how we were going to be able to track our success in combating climate change. And all of a sudden, to me, Tom, and to others, it seems like we just got stuck in the mud and decided to just stop doing anything.
Listen, I couldn't agree more. And the first state that has built offshore wind is Rhode Island. And I've been there. It is not a tourist detractor. It is a tourist attraction. And I spoke to the guy who built it. And I said to him, what's the most important thing if a state wants to move the needle? What's the most, on offshore wind, what's the most important thing you need? And his answer, sustained executive leadership. That's what you need. We haven't had it here.
But isn't that the same on solar? Isn't that the same on every sort of good idea that's an industry ball breaker?
Well, it's particularly true on all of these issues relating to climate. It's particularly true because just think about it, Nestor. What you need in offshore wind, you're going to have to deal with local governments because they have equities. You got to deal with the federal governments because there's a lot of permitting. You got to deal with community colleges because you want to build a pipeline of workers. You've got to deal with business leaders. You want to deal with the transportation issues here in Baltimore City, because I spoke to a guy out in Southwest Baltimore and we were talking about offshore wind, and he said, unless we've got both the red line and a muscular transportation infrastructure, that 6 or 7 mile drive to the Port of Baltimore from Southwest Baltimore, it might as well be the Port of Philadelphia, because if you're transit dependent, it's going to take you 2 hours to get there. So you need executive leadership that's going to have all these moving parts in place. They're offshore wind components, Nestor. They're not made in the US currently. We should be making them here in Maryland. This is win for workers, win for businesses, win for the environment. And again, in the offshore wind context, these are $30, $35 an hour jobs. We have to work harder in the solar context. And the problem we have, Nestor, with solar is that China has been dumping solar panels in this country for years. And so, the Republic Steel plant, where I grew up not too far from in Buffalo of my youth, which is shut down, has been replaced by a Tesla solar panel manufacturing facility. That's good news. The challenge is those jobs are paying $15 an hour. My friends' fathers who were working at Bethlehem Steel and Republic Steel in the 70s and the early 80s before the economy tanked, they were making $30 an hour fully loaded back then.
I fed my family in Dundalk. My dad worked at the Point. So, yeah, we've talked a lot about Trade Point Atlantic. Tom Perez is our guest, Democratic National Committee. And through all, I think we've talked so much, Harvard all the way through. I wanted to ask you about this race in particular, because we've talked to other governors folks. One of the reasons I'm doing this I'm doing 30 crab cakes in 30 days. I'm starting in Ocean City. I'm going out to Western Maryland, hence all of our crab cake conversation beginning this week here with Faidley's and Costas and State Fair and our friends, Pizza John's being one of them as well with Dutch Rootsburger. The hot potato that Baltimore is, right? Like Freddie Gray, which begat criminal activity from our mayor here. I live here. Usually I show my picture of the Inner Harbor where I live that's for sale with Moeller and Gary Realty. But I've lived in the city for 18 years. And when I hear people from the county say, I'm not going to come into the city anymore, issues like the squeegee boy, all of these things that happen. This is why we built Baltimore Positive. But the governor's race, it's going to feel very different to me when I'm in Cambridge and in Salisbury and in Chestertown and in Cumberland about the red line or the city, because the national politics has divided this thing. But we're such a strange state. We're a blue state with a red governor. I mean, I don't know what to make of this. We have been talking about this the last 3 months, but give me a little picture of the temperature outside of Baltimore for Baltimore, because I feel like as much as this is the economic engine, and even if you live in Carroll County or Harford County, you don't realize how important it is. Baltimore can't be kicked to the curb. And I think there's a large segment of voters out there that says, let it burn, let it burn. And I know I went to high school with these people, and it's incredibly frustrating to me to see someone, Tom, wear an Oriole hat in Pasadena or Middle River or Abingdon or Finksburg or Cockeysville and say, I hate Baltimore. I ain't never going back in the city. Ain't no more. And I say, well, you're going to come back. You're going to need to come back. We need to make it attractive for you to come back. But all of these issues that you talk about that we've all experienced. I mean, I worked at the paper at Calvert Street, getting my car broken into in the 80s when I worked at the Sun. These issues, and certainly the murder statistic that seems to stick to the mayor, that the governor says, not my city. Right. I sit here and watch all of this. So in this race, Baltimore can't be the weakling in this. Baltimore needs to be the strength for whomever wins.
Listen, we all succeed when we all succeed. And my family always taught me, frankly, my faith teaches me, we all succeed only when we all succeed. And that's the essence. The success of Baltimore and the success of Maryland writ large are inextricably intertwined. And as someone who spent the better part of a decade in the city doing lead paint work, doing criminal justice work, I've seen it firsthand. In the aftermath of Freddie Gray, President Obama asked me to coordinate the federal response. And Nestor, I remember vividly an event we did at Frederick Douglass High School in the aftermath. I brought a few cabinet secretaries with me, and there was a student there, and I wish I could remember his name, and I don't, but I remember what he said. He looked at me in the eye and he said, you know what? I'm a straight A student. I got game. I got a future. But I'm frustrated because I see kids at other schools who have access to more like AP courses. Full disclosure, like my nephew went to Poly, my niece went to City, wonderful schools. And his point was simply, don't give up on me. Give me more, because I can do it. And that motivated me every single day. And that continues to motivate me. And you said something, Nestor, that is so important. We cannot, Baltimore will not realize its true potential as long as we continue to have a governor who doesn't pay attention to Baltimore, who simply lobs grenades at the city of Baltimore, metaphorical, in saying, the stuff about just blaming crime issues instead of solving those problems. We should have a criminal justice coordinating committee. Brandon Scott and the city council should know that they have a partner day in and day out. Instead, what happened when he came in? He cancels the red line. There's so many investments that weren't made that should have been made. I am a firm believer that Baltimore's best days are ahead of us, but I'm an equally firm believer that we can't do it alone. And it's an all hands on deck enterprise. And you know what? There's one hand that hasn't been on deck in this enterprise, and that's been the governor's office in Annapolis. And that is shameful. And I believe that it is so essential. And you know what? I say that as someone who lives in Montgomery County. And I say it's equally essential that regardless of where you live, you have access to broadband. You know, I talked to someone down in Salisbury recently, and you'll get down there and get a good crab cake in your 30 crab cake 30-day tour. And it was the story broke my heart. You know, small children, they're waking up in the morning, they get in their parents' car, they drive to a local business park, they park as close as possible to the building because they're trying to access their internet so their kids can go to Zoom school. We're one of the wealthiest states in the country. We can do better than that. We can do much better than that. And so that's why I say we all succeed only when we all succeed. We only succeed when that young man that was so inspiring at Frederick Douglass is able to realize his highest and best dreams. We only succeed when those children who are getting in a car in Salisbury going to try to find a Zoom link, when they can do it in their home and they can thrive. We only succeed when our immigrants succeed. Remember, the Port of Baltimore was the second highest port of entry for immigrants at the beginning of the 20th century. Baltimore and Maryland have always welcomed our immigrants. They are what make America great. And we need leaders who are going to bring folks together. And finally, you know what? Whether you're in Garrett County, Baltimore County, or Charles County or Baltimore City, if you lose your job, you got to be able to get your unemployment benefits right away. Government needs to work for you. We need to fix the damn unemployment system here in Maryland so that people can count on it. We need to fix the public health system. So God forbid we have another pandemic. People aren't dying unnecessarily. That's the thing we do. We all succeed only when we all succeed. And I've prided myself throughout my life in bringing folks together, making sure people work. Ted Kennedy taught me that idealism and pragmatism are not mutually exclusive. And that's always been my mantra. Let's get things done. Let's have that North Star. And people can look what I've done in the past to figure out what that North Star is. That North Star has always been opportunity for everyone, especially folks living in the shadows. We can do this, but it ain't going to be easy. But Baltimore needs a partner in Annapolis. Salisbury needs a partner on broadband. So many parts of this state have needs. And I think we need a governor who's going to organize everywhere. And Don, you said something that I didn't want to let go, which is about the race. We have to understand that in governor's races, Maryland is a purple state.
Without a doubt. I have that argument with my friends all the time, Tom. They don't believe me.
We've lost 3 out of the last 5 elections. You can't say those things are one-offs. And that's why in this primary season, we need someone who can articulate a vision, can demonstrate a proven track record for governance, can lead to a primary where people turn out and people are excited, and then can pivot right away to a general election so that we hit the ground running and can bring Marylanders together. I think that's what we need. And if we want to have our head in the sand and pretend that Maryland isn't a purple state for governor's elections, we do so at their peril. I certainly know what the state of affairs are.
Well, Tom, I want to combine a couple of things there. And then sometime before we get out of here, I want to make a connection between Senator Kennedy, President Clinton, and President Obama, because I think that's a fascinating group that you worked for. But I want to connect a couple of things in your background and what you're doing now that I think might help tell a story. As the head of the DNC, you went all over the country, and I want you to take a moment, Tom, because I think sometimes DNC and Democrats get a bad rap. We think, oh man, we won the presidency, but we haven't been able to sell our goods across the country. And I think you have a little different look at that when you take a look at where we were a few years ago and where we are today. I'd like you to touch on that, but I'd also like you to touch on what have you learned from traveling across the country with the DNC and now currently as you travel the state trying to decide whether or not to run for governor on what I'll call a listening tour. What are you learning about our nation? What are you learning about families? What are you learning about people as they sit at their kitchen table?
Yeah. Well, the number one thing I've learned is so many people are taking it on the chin. This pandemic has increased the number of billionaires and has dramatically increased people who've fallen off the cliff. Women have particularly taken it on the chin because women are caregivers. They're the ones who had to leave the workforce. So many people, Don, who have an empty seat at the kitchen table because they've lost a loved one to COVID unnecessarily. I'm proud of what we've done, what we were able to do over the last 4 years. I mean, when I ran for the DNC because our democracy was broken. It was on fire. It was a 5-alarm blaze. And my parents taught me not to run away from fire, but run toward the fire and try and put it out. And 4 years ago at this point, we had 15 Democratic governors, 15 or 16. We now have 23. We had 16 or 17 attorneys general. We now have, I think, 23 or 24, including one of the best in the country, by the way, Brian Frosch. We didn't have the Senate, we didn't have the House, we didn't have the White House. Now we've flipped 8 legislative chambers from red to blue, including the Commonwealth of Virginia. 4 years ago, they had 66 Republicans and 34 Democrats in their House of Delegates. And now they're 55-45, Democrat in the governor's residence, Democrat in the Senate. So we've made progress. We had to rebuild our infrastructure and rebuild trust. And what I learned from my journeys across the country as DNC chair is we got to show up everywhere. So many places I went to and people said, one guy in northwestern Wisconsin said, I feel politically homeless because the Democratic Party left me. You don't show up. And you know what? I hear the same thing in Maryland. I hear from people, I want you here. And I've been doing events all over the state, and we're going to continue to do listening all over the state. The issues may be different on some level, but there's a through line. People are suffering economically. People want good schools. They want to make sure that we go to school on this pandemic, that we address the fundamental inequality that exists in this state. We're the richest state, or one of the richest states in the country. Why is it that we have people in Salisbury and elsewhere that have to go and drive to get broadband? Why is it that we continue to have pockets of abject poverty here in Baltimore City and elsewhere? We can do so much better. Why do we punch below our weight on all too many things? And what I've seen in other cities is that when you come together, there's so many examples of false choices, Don. I believe that when the business community, faith communities, labor, grassroots communities come together around a common vision, the sky's the limit. We can get so much done. I've seen it. I watched Ted Kennedy do it. I watched President Obama do it. I watched President Clinton do it. We need to muster that spirit because we beat Donald Trump, but Trumpism persists. We saw it in the election results in 2020. We lost some down ballot races that I never would have thought we would have lost.
Well, Tom, I think we saw it
persists.
this week out, Wyoming and what happened in DC and where Liz Cheney is. I heard you talking North Star a few minutes ago, like to have a vision. Look, I don't let Don rail about the Republicans here. I like cut him off. So I'm breaking my own rule here and asking you this question. I just don't like Fox News batshit talking points. But when it comes to where the Democrats are with saying we have a plan, it's about people, what do you think the Republican side of this is for a Maryland voter at this point? What are they offering the person in Salisbury or the perceived county that may be more 70 or 80% Trumpian? or Larry Hogan that would look at a Democrat and say, I'm voting for no Democrats. Because I hear that from so much of the red side that they just wouldn't because they wouldn't, which is what led us to Liz Cheney earlier this week.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely tip my cap to her. I watched her speech. The party of Reagan, it's not just the party of Lincoln is dead, the party of Reagan is dead. In 1986, there was comprehensive immigration reform signed by President Reagan. And what people don't know is that in the aftermath of that, he took executive action because he believed that the immigration reform bill that he signed didn't go far enough. That was the party of Reagan. That party is dead. What does the Republican Party stand for? Well, nothing. And part of the evidence of that, Nestor, is go to the Republican convention. They didn't have a platform. That's like the first time in history. We don't need a platform. Our platform is 2 words: Donald Trump, whatever he says. And the appalling lack of courage right now. And what is so troubling to me is, you've probably heard the adage, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but they're not entitled to their own set of facts. They are manufacturing facts right now to pass laws that, among other things, make it a crime to give a bottle of water in Georgia to someone at the polling booth. And here's what's scarier than hell about that. This Supreme Court, there's a legal proposition that says when legislatures make findings in the context of legislating, those findings of fact are entitled to deference by a court. Well, what about findings of fiction? This was an election that was a clean election. And by the way, we should be having a bipartisan celebration of record turnout in a pandemic. That record turnout helped us win the presidency, no doubt about it, and the Senate, and retain the House. But that record turnout helped them gain 12 seats or whatever it was in the US House. I mean, I would have bet $1,000 that we were going to be net plus in the US House in this election. Why did that happen? Donald Trump's people came out. And I'm not saying that was unfair or it was rigged or it was BS. No, they came out and they beat us in those races. We got to go to school.
Tom, but in the
midst of that, without a platform,
and in the midst of that, Tom, I love when you said the finding of fiction. I literally have now watched it 2 or 3 times, trying to see if I can make sense of what I saw. And just recently, not 1, but 2, 3, 4 Republican congressmen in a hearing testified that the big lie is truly that there was an insurrection on January the 6th, and that what we really had were tourists walking through the building, taking pictures, Tom. Now, as the head of the DNC, you were battling, Nestor calls it whatever crazy. How do Democrats fight back against that?
By organizing, voting. Some people have asked, well, why haven't you jumped in already? Number 1, I want to listen. And number 2, I got a little bit of a late start. You know why? Because we had an overtime period after the election, 2 months. It was called Georgia. The best remedy here is for everybody to get out and make sure they vote, because that's how we won in November. That's how we will continue to win. This is an existential crisis right now in our democracy, in that I know in my own lifetime, 70% of Republicans believe that the election was stolen. That's just a remarkable. I'm fundamentally
without a kernel of evidence.
I published a blog just a day or 2 ago doing the math, quoting my favorite first grade teacher, Sister John Brebeuf. I could actually do the math. It's 50 to 60 million Republicans believe that Donald Trump won the election. We're in uncharted waters, Tom.
Well, and you asked, what is the Republican Party today? What are they fighting for? Well, the voter suppression is their number 1 thing, and the way we will take back America is by making sure that transgender youth can't participate in sports. I mean, that's unconscionable. I mean, they just want to fight culture wars. And it's, I've done a lot of work at the Justice Department on behalf of transgender youth. And we should be protecting, empowering them so that they can realize their highest and best dreams. What they're doing is shameful, just beyond shameful. And you know, my counterpart, or my former counterpart at the RNC, I mean, you need a backbone. I mean, gosh, you know, her grandfather, you know, Governor Romney actually had a backbone. He spoke out against the Vietnam War. And she's, you know, when I became DNC chair, we had to make some tough decisions. I'm confident there are people listening to this who still don't agree with certain things I did, but my North Star was always bringing the party together. I've got, you know, members of Congress who are still mad at me because we did superdelegate reform. They said I took their power away. No, we returned power to the grassroots. And you know what? Your power doesn't derive from the fact that you're a superdelegate. Your power derives from the fact that you're fighting for the issues people care about. And I'm happy to have taken some of that friendly fire, because my North Star was, we've got to articulate our values, return the party to the grassroots, and work our tail off to show what we're fighting for, and then get people out and voting. And that's what we were able to do in 17, 18, 19, and then most importantly in 2020. And you know, she's still kowtowing to Trump. And that is unfortunate. But the thing you have to remember in history, you know, when you know, McCarthy was censored by the United States Senate.
Which one? The old one or the new one?
Joe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just make it sure.
Good point. Good point. Well, talk about a useless. I better stop there because I promised I wouldn't swear on this podcast. But you know, when Joe, yeah, that makes one of us, right? When Joe McCarthy was censored, you know, that didn't bring an end to McCarthyism. McCarthyism persisted for many years to come. And what we have to understand.
Tom, 34%. God, this is great. That's what we said. We're never going to straight line. I use that in one of John Meacham's podcasts on the Soul of America. He talks about the fact that in the destruction of McCarthy, once he had been discredited and run out of town, 34% of the American public.
I mean, here's what I was always taught. We should have a robust debate about the issues of the day. And then we should work hard collectively to make it as easy as possible for eligible people to vote. We did that to a large extent in 2020. And we had record turnout in a frickin' pandemic. Unbelievable. And now the reaction is, well, you know, it's a big lie and all that. And that is just so important. It's really illustrative, Nestor and Don, of the bankruptcy, the moral bankruptcy of this party, the Republican Party. I have said privately, and I'll say it publicly, I want to have a robust two-party system. You know, when I worked with Ted Kennedy, I worked with across the aisle with a host of Senate staffers and then senators to get things done. That's what the American people want to see. You know, on immigration, the Republicans are doing nothing because they think that that's a big midterm election issue. So they would rather have the issue than solve the problem. In 1995, when I worked for Senator Kennedy on immigration reform, literally, we had 85 amendments in the committee, and you needed one hand to count the number of party line votes, because they put nation and country and the best interests above partisan moments. And that's just not happening now. And a big part of the problem is gerrymandering. As long as people on the right.
By the way, John Sarbane's starting the tour with us at Fadley, so it'll be on the agenda.
Well, I'm so glad. And you know, HR 1, I applaud the congressman for his leadership. And I applaud Speaker Pelosi, by the way, for her dogged pursuit of this. She has been, what a rock. You know, there's two people that Trump could never brand throughout, notwithstanding his best efforts, including getting impeached. One was Joe Biden, and the other was Nancy Pelosi. I mean, she just eats him for lunch. And
Still
it's
supported his
so
agenda. She little Italy'd him
And
every
it is
time, didn't
so
she? She just little
it
Italy'd him
is so
every
fun to
time.
watch. And Joe Biden the same way. And people understand that Joe Biden is a good man. His values are their values. And that's really what we need.
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you, I don't want people to be hangdog right now. What I want people to be is optimistic and determined, and to understand that for us to succeed as a state, we really do need all hands on deck. Baltimore we can't get to the next level if it's just Brandon Scott working alone in Baltimore. That's not fair to Brandon, to the mayor, I should say, excuse me. And that's not fair to the great residents of the great city of Baltimore. We need others in there, and we have equities. We have a moral obligation. We have every obligation as a state to be a meaningful partner. And I'll tell you again, you asked me before, Don, I've had the privilege of seeing the country as your labor secretary and as your head of the civil rights division. And I've seen so many cities where folks were working together and they were punching above their weight. You know, we've got to stop punching below our weight.
Tom Perez, our guest here. Tom, before we go, we began with crab cakes, went to baseball, then it went like hardcore right in. You know, where give me the crab cake place again. I'm just trying to make a list here. Check it twice.
Oh, absolutely. Franklin's on Route 1, about 1.5 miles south of University of Maryland.
All right.
Well, Tom, that means Nestor's going to be calling you to grab a crab cake with him down at Franklin.
Well, actually, let me just put a finer point. Nestor, you meet me at Franklin's, I'm buying, okay?
No. We're gonna get carry out and go to a baseball game.
Well, I could do that.
As we're gonna figure it out. Really appreciate the visit with you. Good luck along life's journey and trail. We've really enjoyed the conversation. Hope it opens the doors to some more conversations. Next time, crab cake. You mentioned the beer, so I don't even have to tell you that, right? So
Twisted Turtle.
Hey, real quick, Nestor, before we bid our guests goodbye, because you guys were both Clementing. I was thinking as this show went on, to this day, and Nestor, you'll tell me which game it was, and which series. Roberto Clemente, and the runner was, I think it was Frank, went from first to third on a ball hit in the right field corner in a World Series. Roberto Clemente picked the ball up in Memorial Stadium at the foul line and threw a fastball. I mean, it didn't go, it didn't loop in the air to third base. Frank beat it. I'm pretty sure it was Frank. Beat it by a millisecond. The greatest throw to this day I've ever seen. I mean, it was a 90-mile-an-hour fastball.
I had Dave Parker on the show last month. Parker would argue that the All-Star Game 79. I'm just saying.
I'm telling you, it was the greatest throw I ever saw.
Don,
I'm actually have to go YouTube it.
Not 100% sure, but I think that was 71.
I think it was 71, and I think it was Frank. I'm going to go look it up. I'm pretty sure it was Frank going from first to third, and I thought, that's easy. The ball's in the corner. He'll reach standing up, and if we had replay, it probably would have been on replay. To this day, the greatest throw I've ever seen.
All right, break it up, guys. We'll continue this over beer, crab cakes, baseball. We'll talk about fixing the world. Tom, really appreciate the visit. Thanks for all your service under Barack Obama and living here in Baltimore and flying the Baltimore flag for us around the state here over the next year, okay?
I appreciate it.
Tom,
Take care, Nestor.
Come back.
Great to see you, Don.
Thank you.
Tom Perez, our guest here on Baltimore Positive. We are kicking off the Crab Cake Tour at Fadley's, hence my background. We're going to be doing that this week. Also at Costas this week, celebrating their 50th anniversary. And then next week on Friday, the 21st, Al Fresco with our friends at State Fair. Don, I saw the crab cakes coming out of the kitchen there the other day, and I thought, I'm going to be having one of those soon. I've been abstaining from all crab cakes until the tour starts. So,
they're legit. Here we go.
I had some real crabs. I had some crab imperial over Costas last week. So I'm working my way into this, but it's going to be a steady diet, a crab cake a week, every week for the rest of my life, just like a good Baltimorean. We are WNST AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore positive.